Have you ever looked at all the gear musicians use and wonder, how does it all work? My name's Dustin, and my family and I are setting out on a quest to inspire both adult and kid musicians to create new sounds together and learn all about what it takes to produce great music. We'd like to invite you along on the journey as we explore the gear professional studios, musicians, and hobbyists use to create their art. We'll take a close-up look at the gear and ask,
what's this button do?
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of What's This Button Do? I'm your host, Dustin, and today we are going to be looking at the next in the series of killer universal audio pedals, the Knuckles. Now, the Knuckles is based on the old dual rec amplifiers, and anybody who's been following the channel for the past few weeks knows I did a deep dive into the UA Anti a few weeks ago. Fell in love with that distortion. It had so many cool features on it. I just absolutely loved it. The Knuckles is a very similar pedal. On face value, it looks the same, kind of is modeling two amps that definitely were used in the same genres of music, definitely more metal, heavy rock kind of amps. So I wanted to take a look at the two together, see how they compare, see how they contrast, and see, do I really need the Knuckles on my board? So let's hop over onto the pedal board and take a listen to them and see what you think. Okay, so for today's demo, we're going to be using our trusty Gibson Murphy Lab Les Paul. I'll just keep it set up real nice and easy in the bridge pickup. But we're going to be doing this exactly like we did the demo on the Universal Audio Anti a few weeks ago. I am not going to be running this direct. I'm not going to be running it through the effects loop of an amplifier. I have got a simple Fender amp mic'd up with no effects loop. This is going right in the front of the amp. I want you to hear what this sounds like as a pedal, because I know there's tons of people out there going, oh, that's wrong, you can't do it that way, but you can. Don't let those haters fool you. This is an amazing distortion pedal in its own right. I don't want you to think this just has to be a direct recording tool or you have to have some expensive amp that has an effects loop. You don't. You can take your everyday standard amps and make them sound like a distorted monster with these UA pedals, and the Knuckles is no different. So that's what we're going to do today. For those that are looking for a demo on the direct sound or on something going through an effects loop, plenty of them out there. I know there's a ton of demos out there. This is probably not the demo for you. But for everybody else, stick around. Let's hear how this sounds, because I genuinely think this is one of the coolest distortions I have ever heard in my life. So with that, we're not going to mess, if anybody who's watched the anti-demo, we're not going to mess with the cabinet simulation or anything on here. So let's dive right into the pedal and take a little look before we hear some sounds. So first thing you're going to notice here is the layout is very, very similar. You've got your gain knob up here. You've got your presence knob, your output. You've got your bass, mids, and treble EQ. And then it has the alt modes just like on the Anti, where you can boost up. There's kind of like a hidden overdrive pedal built into the pedal. I'm leaving those at the factory default settings. I'm not going to mess with the alt modes for this. They're just, when I actually look at the settings on the amp, it's got the overdrive cranked a little bit, gives it a little bit of extra push, but it's not a massive amount of push. It's just making it feel like you've got a tube screamer pedal put in front of your pedal if you were doing emulation. So it definitely comes through more on emulation than it does in the front of an amp. But there is a little difference between this and the Anti. You still have your noise gate, which we talked about this in the Anti demo. I think it's the best noise gate I've ever heard. It's musical. It doesn't cut out too early, not as fuzzy. And I gotta say, I even think on the Knuckles, the noise gate is dialed in even more. I don't know how they did it, but it just sounds really awesome. I'll let you hear that in a second. But there's 3 channels on there, just like the Anti, but the Anti had a rhythm, a crunch, and then a heavy setting on it. This actually has a clean, a crunch, and a red channel, which is your heavy distortion, right? These function a little bit differently than on the Anti. So let's dig into them a little bit and let you hear the sounds. This is the clean sound through my amp. Cool. Now, let's add in the Knuckles. We're in the clean section. I've got everything set at noon right now. First is clean. So here already, the output dropped a little bit. We've got our output here. We can crank this up a little bit. Just bring it up even more. Now, if we bring the gain settings down a little bit, you can really clean this up. Pretty nice, right? Just a nice clean sound. It's got a little bit of grit, a little bit of edge on it versus the clean. As you hear, you're still getting a little bit of that volume drop in here. Let's bring some presence in, and I'll show you what this presence knob does, because it's not like... Hear that extra sparkle? When you bring that presence knob up, you really... We bring it all the way down, you'll hear a massive change. Now, I normally would never run an amp with a presence all the way cranked. I've never liked that on an old Super Lead or anything like that. On this one, though, I do think that there is some magic in that, especially when we start introducing more gain. If we bring the gain up a little bit and get around 1 o'clock and then have that presence turned up. Let's bring it all the way maxed out. Serious gain on tap. Bring it back down. So you can hear the volume is very much tied to that gain. Like, it definitely drops a lot having the gain turned down. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to let you hear a little something here. I'm going to bring the treble up a little bit, wash these out just a little bit. Here's the thing I don't like about this. You can hear that. You hear that little, as the note starts to fade away. When I start using vibrato in my fingertips, when it's on the clean mode, you get this little digital artifact as it's kind of processing that sound, and the noise gate is starting to clamp down. There's a weirdness there. Same thing happened on the Anti. I don't like it. I personally would never use the clean channel. I genuinely don't think most people are going to buy these pedals for the clean channel. But if you're looking for a clean, overdriven tone, if you're doing rhythm, you're probably okay, because when you're just doing like a... When you're not sustaining notes out, you're not getting that digital artifact. But if you're doing lead lines where you're going to be sustaining notes for a while, I'd probably give this a pass and go with a regular overdrive pedal. It just sounds better. It's going to give you a much cleaner feel to it. But the magic of this pedal is in the crunch and the gain channel. So let's switch over to that now, and we're going to mess around. I'm going to set the EQs back. And this is where we'll really start messing with the EQ. So let's bring everything back to the middle here. I'm going to leave my volume right about 1 o'clock, and we'll just leave the gain right around 1, 2, and let you hear that. So here's what the crunch channel sounds like. Right off the bat, there's this thickness, this kind of like chewiness to the gain. And a sag there, kind of like the Anti. There's this like compression feel when you hit that note. That distortion just starts to sag and squeeze a little bit, and it creates this natural sound that, like, normally if I was to run a distortion pedal in front of just a Fender Blues Junior, you're not going to really get that full-on compression that you would get from a Soldano or a diesel VH4. This emulates that and creates that sound in a low wattage amp. I'm so impressed with the way that sounds. And what's crazy is if we get up into the higher setting, into the red, I'm going to show you the difference between that. So this is the red. Back to the center. Back to the red. Now, I'm going to say something here, and I'm hoping if you're listening through good speakers or headphones. Your iPhone's not going to show you this, but what that does when you go from your crunch channel, which I find to be honestly just as heavy, if not heavier than the heavy channel on the Anti, you get into the red section, you get this bass rumble and this thickness and this chewiness in the bass side of things that almost hits you in the back of the head. You kind of feel it rumbling. You feel that thickness there. Now, this can be off-putting as well. It is different. So by way of comparison, let's do this. Let us set up, I'm going to set up the knobs very similar to kind of that favorite setting that we found in the Anti a few weeks ago. And I'm going to turn on the Anti, and I'm going to turn on here. You'll notice I did not crank the output, and there's a reason for that. I'm going to show you something real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the Anti, and I'm going to let you hear what that sounds like. You're just using our setting from last week. Cool? Now, here's the knuckles, but with the knuckles with the volume at 1 o'clock. If I crank the knuckles all the way, back to the, so you hear there's already a little bit more volume in the knuckles. Like I said, the overdrives are set to the exact same settings, everything. There's definitely more volume in the knuckles, and there's just a little bit of that thicker, flubbier bass sound in there, which if you're looking for that sound, it can be absolutely killer. In a few minutes, I'll drop down to drop D and let you hear what this sounds like with a little drop D, just basic riffs on there. Because when you're doing those for some basic, rhythm sounds, it's going to sound really, really good. But there is a lack of tightness, and I think that's what the Anti brings to the table. The Anti has this tight metal sound to it, where the knuckles definitely feels more raw, more old school kind of metal, if that makes sense to you. It's definitely not as clean and smooth as the Anti is. So depending on what style you're looking for, that's really going to be what I would tell you if you're trying to choose between the knuckles and the Anti. That's probably where you want. If you want old school, a little bit flubbier bottom end, a little bit like gnarlier sound, knuckles is for you. If you want smoother, kind of leveled out distortion tones, I would definitely go with the Anti. I think it offers that. So let's go back now. Let's start playing. We're going to go back to our crunch channel. I'm going to bring the presence down a little bit. I'm going to bring our output back down, and let's just play with this a little bit. We're going to start with the EQs just so you can kind of see what they do. Got my volume rolled up. Let's get the knuckles on. And you'll notice again, I've got the pedal on. No noise there. That's again, that noise gate is just awesome. But the second I play, see, it's such a good gate at clamping down. But watch, I'm going to play just a note. See, until it gets right to the end of that, you don't really hear those digital artifacts near as much when you're on the higher gain channels. It just kind of fades out there. And when I'm on the full-on red, it really does go all the way. You don't hear it near as bad as you do when you're on the clean side of things. I like that. I like that it's just got that natural sound of an amp fading out kind of sound to it. Just killer. But listen to this just for a standard. Again, I'm in normal tuning here. Let's bring our trebles all the way up and let's hear what that sounds like. If we roll those trebles back, you can really wash it out just like you could on the end. So I like to set with those trebles right around that 1 o'clock mark. Now on the mids kind of thing, it's the same. It can wash out the mids, not as much as you would expect from like a high, like full-on EQ. It doesn't have that much of a sweep to it. But let's play up, we'll play around the 10 to the 12th fret. If you bring it up, you can really pierce them through. If we bring it all the way down, more. Sounds pretty stinking cool. Now with a lot of metal though, you're gonna wash out your mids a little bit. Tightens up the mix a little bit, lets those bass frequencies and those treble frequencies really shine. Same thing with the bass now. Let's just go down, we'll just play an E minor. It can get really rumbly. You can hear that kind of oversaturating and getting too thick. When we bring it back down and we wash it out to like there, but if we go all the way down, even with the bass wash all the way out, it doesn't sound that bad. That's what I like about this, is it's still usable, and especially for more of a surgical type EQ, when you're trying to find a place for your guitar to sit in the mix, when you've got maybe a bass player, a drummer going and everything, you can really use that bass to scoop out a little bit, create some frequencies for yourself, or if you're missing some of those frequencies from your other instruments, you can crank that up a little bit and fill those frequencies out. So I think there's a lot of beauty in that, a lot of fun. But again, I think honestly where we're at right now is when I've got these two rolled back a little bit, we've got our treble pushed up just a little bit, our volume at about 1 o'clock, and that presence knob almost maxed up. What you get there is just this insane tight riff. Let's do the drop D real quick. I'm going to just retune. So we've got both the knuckles and the ante set up at the exact same settings. I want you to let you hear one last thing here, just comparing the two. I tried to equal out the volumes here. I want you to listen to the noise gate as it clamps down on both of these to kind of give you a difference between the two. I've got the noise gate setting set up at the exact same spot on the noise gate. So watch what happens. Here's your ante. Okay. Now the knuckles. Notice how there's no scratchiness, no crackles around the edges of the knuckles. I think there's a little bit more definition there. Versus see, there's just that little bit of edge around there. You can still hear it crackling just a little bit. So I have to play with that. I have to seal that noise gate down a little bit more on the ante, and it's still, no matter how much I tweak it, I still get those little edges around there. The knuckles, I have not had that problem at all. But you can hear the difference there. The ante definitely has that different, smoother kind of feel to it. The knuckles has the rawness. Personally, at first, I really like the ante, but I think the knuckles is my distortion of choice. I really think the tightness here, with still being able to flub up that gain if you need to, but then you can roll back the bass, crank the amp a little bit to tighten it up a little. There's so much versatility with the knuckles that you can get dirty, flubby, all the way to high-end, just nastiness. I'm sold on the knuckles. I think it actually is going to take the ante off my board, which is crazy because I just added that like a month ago and I've fallen in love with it. But the knuckles is just so freaking good. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. I think they did a great job. Not that you can use both. I think the ante has its place. Like I said, it's tighter. It's got a more modern sound to it. And I think for rhythm, the ante is going to be the bomb. But the knuckles is just so versatile across the board. I'm so blown away by it. All right, I hope that gave you a clear view of the differences between the two pedals, because these truly are, for being similar form factors, launching around the same time, that focused on very similar genres. I gotta say, UA gave us two very, very different pedals. I am, like I said at the end there, I'm blown away by the knuckles. I think the knuckles took the few things I didn't like about the ante and gave me that extra volume on tap, gave me the tighter noise gate, made just everything look just a little bit better, and gave me the ability to get it to sound a little nastier and not quite as smooth on the edges. I love that. Not a big fan of the clean channel. Like I said, I don't like those microphonics and that weird little digital sound that happens when you're sustaining a note. I have not noticed that on any of my recordings that I've done with the lead channel. So I really do think it's just in the clean channel. It's just trying to overprocess and creating that weird crackling sound. So as long as you're not buying it for clean, which like I said in the video, I can't imagine anybody is, I think this is the perfect pedal. I think if you go with crunch or you go with the red channel, you won't be disappointed. It's just so flippin' good. And like I said, I'm just running this in the front of a cheap amp. I've tried this now with my 2 Rocks. I've tried it with a few other amps. The Soldano, oh my gosh. Like if you run the clean channel of the Soldano and push this in front of it, wow. It sounds even better than running the overdrive channel of the Soldano. And that's no joke. It's just absolutely amazing. So whatever UA did with this magic box, the noise gate alone, worth the price of purchase. I mean, that noise gate is just absolutely killer. One of the best I've ever heard. And the sounds from this box are legendary. So well done, Universal Audio. Hope that helps. Can't wait to see what they do next. Every single one of these they come out with, it just gets better and better and better. So super excited to see what they're going to do next down the line. Well, as always, thanks to my friends for Palen for hosting the channel. I really appreciate it. Please, 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 if you get a chance, go take a look at their website. They're getting in a ton of new stuff constantly. I know there's a bunch of new pedals on the way. Some really cool stuff up there. And please, if you get a chance as well, give me a follow over on Instagram. I'm hoping as things calm down here, once we get past the election and work starts to calm down a little bit, I'll be able to film some more like little side projects with some of the pedals that we've looked at over the course of the year. So look for more content. They're coming soon. We've got some new pedals from Musitronics and Mutron coming. We've got some new pieces I can't even tell you about yet that are going to be really cool. And then we're also going to take a look over Christmas at some vintage fuzzes and vintage pedals that are not available anymore, that I thought would be fun to just kind of take a look at some of my faves. So we're going to be taking a look. Like I've got the prescription fuzz here. This thing is just insane. They're Octafuzz. We're going to be looking at a vintage Mutron, several different things. So please join us back over the coming months. We're going to have a lot of fun over here. Thank you as always for coming out. And please, 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 if you have had a chance to play these pedals or have questions about these UA pedals, please comment down below. Again, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of people saying, no, these are only for running direct, or you have to run these through an effects loop, and do not listen to those people. They are telling you misinformation. I'm telling you, you can run this in front of an amp and it still sounds amazing. You have to do it differently. You have to set it up differently than a lot of these other channels out there will show you. But please, please, please give these a shot. If you're not into the whole direct thing and you want to use a tube amp, do not let some of the feedback that's out there on YouTube scare you away. You really can use these pedals quite effectively. So enjoy them. Take care. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week.